Hello, my name is Emily and I'm the creator of Genuinely End Patterns, and today we are going to be sewing the maple dress. I'm actually wearing the maple dress, but in the top version. It's super easy to hack the dress into a top, but I'm going to be showing you the dress today. I'm going to be using a ribbed knit. This pattern is meant for stretchy knit fabrics with about 60 to 70% stretch. It has a center back seam, so it fits super nice, it's super contoured and nice to your bag without any of that like fabric puddling at the lower back area. It is carefully designed so that it is bra friendly. I'm wearing a bra right now. This makes it super comfortable. And I've actually started calling these secret pajamas because I think it's just super comfortable. It's made out of the knit fabric and you can just feel like you just need to throw on one thing and it's stretchy and it's just nice all day long. It comes in 14 different sizes. I will put all that information here. So it can fit lots of different bodies. I will also leave a little discount code down below. If you have not already purchased the maple pattern, you can find a little nice discount code down below. Without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. If you are using the PDF that you can print at home, we're going to print that out, double check that everything is to scale, and then in order to put it together, we're going to either fold or chop off the bottom and right-hand side, and then we're going to be able to align the pieces together, lining up those little triangles in order to form a diamond. So I like to do this when I do the row, and once I have a row together, I'll do the next row, and then I'll just put them on top of each other. So I start forming kind of like columns and long blocks of my pattern. Once everything is assembled, you can cut out the paper pattern, but on this pattern, you're gonna also find a stretch ruler, and then you can use this to check if your fabric is the appropriate stretch percentage for this project, which is around 60 or 70%. So this fabric checks out, it's good. Then I'm gonna actually cut out my paper pattern, have it all ready. You'll notice that there are two different sleeves. So just choose whichever one you want to go with, and I think for this one I'm going to use the slightly subtly bell-shaped sleeve. Let's jump into cutting out this paper pattern onto our fabric. I have decided to fold my knit fabric, and if you're feeling like your knit fabric is a little too thick, maybe you're going to want to cut this in a single layer instead, but I felt like it was going to be pretty okay for me to do this on a folded fabric, so that's what I'm doing. And I'm cutting the center front here is on the fold. The back has a center back seam, so it doesn't need to be on the fold. Here I'm just checking to make sure that everything is on grain, especially if you're using like a rib knit. It's going to be a little bit more obvious if things are not on grain. So just take your time, line things up. A little tip is if you start to get kind of far away from the selvage or a grain line, it is nice to check the grain lines with, the pattern piece right next to it, because you've already made sure that one's on grain. So you can just line up and make sure that those two lines are parallel instead of going all the way across to the selvage or the fold. So I practically have all the pieces on this portion of fabric except for the front lining piece, and then I'm ready to cut. Then I'm going to cut this out using a rotary cutter and a cutting mat. I find that this just provides, the cleanest cut and works really well for knit fabrics, so would recommend doing that. Now is a good time to come and snip all of our notches. You're going to find those on the armholes and at the waist and sometimes at the hip length if you are cutting it out to be a dress. And once that is all ready to go, you have all of your pieces, and now we can get ready to start sewing. But first, let's prep our neckline. So something that happens a lot with knits is that they can kind of get stretched out as you sew, and it creates like this ripply, wavy effect, and it doesn't look so cute, and it won't lay really close to your body. So I'm using stay tape. This one is a non-fusible one, so you can't just like iron it onto the fabric. Instead, we're going to baste it. So I gave it a little tug and it kind of curls, and the side that curls is the one you want to face your fabric, and I'm working on the wrong side. Once I have covered that section, I'm going to snip the excess, and I'm going to pin that into place for now until we can come back and baste it. So we're going to put the stay tape along the front part of the square neckline. You can see that it's really helping the knit fabric not stretch as much. And then we're going to Add it along that vertical section of the square neck and along the shoulder seams. These are all areas that can get kind of stretched out as we're sewing. So I like to add this in, and it really helps prevent that waviness and makes the final pattern lay a lot smoother on your body. I repeated that for the back neckline and shoulders, and same with the lining pieces as well. So all pattern pieces have their necklines and shoulders reinforced with stay tape. Then we're gonna come in and do a basting stitch. So this will be the longest stitch length straight stitch on your machine. And then we're ready to sew the center back seam of both the lining back piece and our regular normal main back piece. These pieces are facing right sides together, and I'm going to repeat that on the main back piece too, matching the right sides and just pinning along this center back seam. And then we're going to take this to the machine, and I ideally would use a serger, but instead, if you don't have that, you can use your sewing machine. You're going to want to set it to a zigzag stitch, or even more preferably, if you have a lightning bolt stitch, and set it so that it has a very narrow lightning bolt. And this is how I'm going to sew all of my seams together. And my seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch, or about 6 millimeters. This sort of project is definitely easier with a serger, but you can definitely still do this on a sewing machine. I'm going to do this whole thing on the sewing machine. Sometimes it can be a little bit hard getting the very beginning of the seam. So sometimes I go back and I just repeat that last little bit to catch all the way to the very edge, and then don't mind the change of location. But we are now still sewing that center back seam, but now I'm working on the main dress piece, and then we're just going to press that seam open. And the perk of using knits is that they fray a lot less, so you don't necessarily need to come in and do a zigzag stitch on the edges, which is super nice. So now we have those pressed open, and we are going to match our shoulder seams on both the lining and the main dress. So pin those or clip them in place, and then bring this over to your machine or serger, and we're going to again use our lightning bolt stitch or the serger to sew that shoulder seam together. Okay, so we are all done with our shoulder seams. They are sewn together. So we are going to, again, press those open. And this just helps to reduce bulk in the shoulder area. Sometimes knit fabrics can be a little bit thicker than a woven, and then it can get kind of bulky if all the seams are stacked on each other. So now let's lay out the dress like this, with the front on one side and the back on the other, and do the same with the lining. We're going to start working on the neckline. So begin by pinning the shoulders on top of each other, stack those seams, use a pin, because we really want to make sure that those are exactly on top of each other. Same with the center back seam, and same with our corners of our square neckline. And then go around the rest of the neckline with clips or pins, and we're going to just line this all up. And then we're going to go in with a basting stitch. So again, the longest stitch length on your machine. And we're going to baste these together before we proceed to the next step. So I'm just basting together the necklines. This is an optional step, but it is something that I do like to do. I feel like you have a lot more control if you baste first and then you zigzag, because if you find out after you zigzagged or overlocked the edges, it's going to be such a pain to remove that. So I always like to go in with the basting stitch first, and then I'm going to go in with a zigzag or an overlock serging to complete the edge for real. We will remove the basting at the very end, so don't worry too much about that. So now that it's all basted around the neckline, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to zigzag that. I feel like it's looking good. I'm actually, again, using my lightning bolt stitch, a very narrow one, and at the corners, I'm going to pivot. If you are using an overlocker, you're going to kind of open up the corner and try to make it into an obtuse angle, and it'll still work out. It will still look like a square neckline, but if you're on a sewing machine, you can actually do that 90-degree pivot. Great, now we have finished that. We're gonna come in to the corners of the square neck, and we're gonna cut those at like a 45-degree angle. This is just gonna really help that fabric look super sharp at the corner, and really give us that nice square neck look. So now I'm just going to flip the lining and push it to the other side. So now our pieces are touching wrong sides together, and this is how they're going to lay when the garment is finished. So I'm going to give this neckline a press with my iron. I want to make sure that that seam is very much, centered, that it's not visible from the front side, especially. That's really important. If it's a little bit more rolled towards the lining, that's okay. But the goal here is just to really get it nice and even and press everything. This next step might look a little funky, but the whole point we're doing this is to prevent the lining from rolling out when you're wearing the dress. So what we're going to do is we're going to push that seam allowance toward the lining, and we want to pin the seam allowance on the lining side. Then we're going to come in and we're going to sew the seam allowance to the lining. This is called underlining, and this really helps keep the lining from rolling out. You could also do top stitching, but I think that underlining looks more professional. It's a lot cleaner looking, so that's what we're going to do. So you kind of have to maneuver the lining a little bit. It's a little bit awkward in here, and you're just going to pin everything. And then we're going to bring this over to our machine, and we are going to zigzag or lightning bolt stitch. So even if you were sewing this on a serger or an overlocker before, you are going to do this on your sewing machine, because I don't really feel like there's a way to do underlining on a serger. So that's what we're gonna do. The main goal while you're doing this is to just make sure that you have the lining and the seam allowance on that same side together. Those are what are being stitched, zigzagged together right now, and that you have the main body piece off to the side, and you're just trying to make everything as, flat as possible and nice and aligned, so there are no bumps or, folds or tucks or anything. And when you get to a corner on the neckline, you're just going to want to kind of gradually pivot, and this will be enough to maintain that square neckline. That's all done. Now you can see that the zigzag stitch is visible on only the lining side, and it's not visible from the main side. And it's really gonna hold that lining in place so that when you're wearing this, you're not gonna get the little lining peeking out at the top, which I find super irritating. And this just makes it look super smooth and super nice. So stay tape and underlining are game changing for creating a better neckline. So now I'm going to take my lining piece right now, and I flipped it so that I can match the right sides together of my lining pieces. So I'm going to pin that side seam together. And then we're going to repeat that for our main pieces as well. We're going to want to match their side seams with the fabric right sides together. We're just going to pin that entire side seam. So then we're going to be able to stitch that with our normal seam allowance of 1/4 inch or about 6 millimeters. We're going to sew the side seams of both the main and the lining. You'll remember that we clipped notches for the waist and for the hips. So just make sure that those notches are matching each other to make sure that everything gets aligned properly. So now I've pinned this entire side seam, and I'm gonna come back and finish pinning the lining side seams, and then we can sew this with our sewing machine with our lightning or zigzag stitch, or use an overlocker if you have that. Lucky you. With our side seams done, we are ready to measure our elastic for our waist. So I find the best way to do this is to actually put the elastic on my body and decide how tight I like it. We all have different preferences for how tight we like our clothing, and you can measure your waist and take away a little bit, but I find it just easiest and most realistic if I put it on my body. So this feels good to me. So I'm going to cut it right there, and then once you have it cut, we can pin that together, and we're going to end up creating an elastic ring basically. Overlap the pieces about 1/2 inch, and then we're going to bring this over to our sewing machine, but first make sure nothing is twisted. And then let's bring this over to the sewing machine and sew. We're gonna sew basically like a rectangle with an X inside. So first make your rectangle, and then once you get back to that first corner, you're going to pivot and you're going to go diagonally down to one of the bottom corners, and then you'll move along the straight side again and then come back up the other diagonal. You could totally do this a different way. I just find that this is a very secure method and helps prevent the elastic from ever coming undone. That is complete. Now I think it's a good time to quarter our elastic, as in to divide it into 4 equal parts. When it was lying flat, it was easy to get those side or half measurements, and then we can fold it in half and we can mark the center front or the front quarter, and the back is basically done for you with where you sewed those overlapped parts of the elastic. And now we're going to find the center of our front lining. So just match the side seams carefully and then fold the fabric, and then we're going to create just a little notch right at that center. And then we're going to be able to match all of our quartered parts of our elastic with the 4 quarters of our lining. Start by grabbing your quartered elastic. We're going to slide that over the top. And then we're going to match this bottom edge to the bottom edge of the lining. And you'll notice that we are pinning it to the wrong side of our lining pieces. So we're matching that pin that was at the back of our elastic with the center back seam. We're matching the other pins that we used to quarter the elastic with the side seams. And the one that's left over is at the very front where we just marked that notch. And then you might need to stretch a little bit to make the fabric of the lining match with the elastic. So just stretch and pin, and then we're going to be able to sew this bottom edge with either your overlocker, or you can use a zigzag or a lightning stitch once again. And we're going to attach those two together. Perfect. Now that that's all done, we can flip the elastic up. So it's going to be concealed, and then come back in with your pins or clips and just hold that in place. So now we're going to sew this top section with, again, a zigzag. And you just go all the way around, and that way we're encasing our elastic, and that way when we wear it, you're not going to feel the elastic rubbing on you. It's going to be covered by fabric. Now we're going to move on to something new. We're going to go to our armholes and match the shoulder seams, match your side seams, clip around the rest, and then we're going to come in with a basting stitch. Again, optional, but I would highly recommend doing it, because if you sew something in with a zigzag stitch or an overlocker and it doesn't look good, or things shifted around on you, it's such a pain to remove. So taking the time to do a little basting stitch to make sure these 2 layers are working together as one can save you a lot of frustration in the future. I've become such a huge fan of doing my sleeve hem before sewing, the seam down the center and then putting it into the armhole. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to press up the hem of the sleeve, and then we're going to you can zigzag this, or if you're feeling fancy, you can try using a twin needle to give this kind of faux cover stitch look. So let me kind of run you through how this works. You're going to need 2 threads at the top. Your machine may be able to hold 2 normal spools of thread, or it might have come with a little special attachment that goes on the bobbin winder to hold the second thread. But if you don't, then you can just double up the bobbins like I did. You're going to thread like normal, try not to tangle them. And then the bottom bobbin will go on the left needle, and the second one on top will go through the right. And one of them should pass under the thread guide and one of them should not. Just choose whichever one. I've had success doing it either way. And then you're going to set it to your center straight stitch. There's no zigzag involved here. The best way I've found to figure out exactly what your guide should be so that you catch just the very edge of this hem is to look at the wrong side first and see how far of a hem that you've pressed up. I'm using about a 1/2 inch here, and now that I know exactly where I should line up my edge of my fabric, I'm going to sew that, because the side that is facing up is going to have the 2 rows of straight stitching, and on the back it's going to be a zigzag. So you want to make sure that the side that is the right side is the one that is up while you are sewing this. So now you can see on the inside we have a little zigzag that caught right on the edge, and on the other side we have those 2 straight lines of stitching. So it looks super nice, and I feel like pretty professional for a little at-home sewing machine. So now we're going to fold this so that the right sides are touching, and we're going to pin this seam, and we're going to go in and sew this either with your overlocker or with a zigzag or lightning stitch. All sewn, and we are going to press that seam open just like some of the other seams we've done on this dress. Give that a nice press, and then we're going to be able to, of course, repeat that for your other sleeve. Now let's flip this inside out so that the right side is facing outwards. Grab the dress that we have been working on, and let's flip this so that it is wrong sides out, and so that our lining is what we can see here, and that the right side is on the inside. And then we're going to grab our sleeve, and in order to know which side is the front and back of the sleeve, you're going to want to look at the notches. A single notch is going to indicate the front, and 2 notches is going to indicate that it's the back. So you can see there's 2 here. That means that is the back of the sleeve. This single notch tells me that this is the front of the sleeve. So I need to match the sleeve to the correct side. There, I'm going to slide it through the neckline, and then match our side seams with the seam of the sleeve. So get those nice and stacked. So I like to use a pin. We're going to pin the top, and then let's match our notches. So match the front notch to the front notch and the back notch to the back notch, and then go around the rest of the sleeve and pin it together. You may find that you need to stretch just a little bit to ease the sleeve into the armhole. And once this is all pinned, you guessed it, we are going to use our lightning stitch or zigzag stitch, or your serger, if you are so lucky to have that. Maybe you can tell I'm a little bit jealous of not being able to use a serger on this, because I was at home and away from my serger for the holidays, and I wish I could have used it. It just makes things like sewing knits so much easier. So let's repeat that for the other sleeve. Get it all set up. Make sure our notches are matching correctly so we're not sewing the left sleeve to the right side or vice versa. And once everything is looking nice and good, go ahead and sew these together. We are nearly done now that we've put in our sleeves. Good just to check to make sure that we don't have any surprise tucks. And once that's done, you might notice that the basting stitch is still there. So this is a good time to remove that. And one way is just to pull a little bit on your fabric, because a straight stitch has no stretching abilities and will just snap. Unlike your lightning stitch or overlock stitch, it will not break. It does have stretching capabilities. So once you remove the basting stitch, you can flip everything so that the right sides are facing out, and we are like there. We have one more thing, and that thing is the hem. We are going to approach this the same way that we did the sleeve. So we're just going to press the hem up a 1/2 inch or about 1¼ centimeters, and then we're going to use our twin needle, or you can use a zigzag stitch. It's totally up to you and whatever your preferences are. And I put it in my twin needle again, and I'm just going around and sewing that whole thing. And then once that is done, you have your beautiful maple dress. I am honestly so happy with this pattern. It is equally cute and comfortable, and I want to wear it all the time. I've even kind of started calling it secret pajamas because, it's just like one piece of clothing, but it just feels so comfortable. And there you go, there's your good shot of the twin needle in action on the hem. And here I am wearing my maple dress out in the wild with those bell sleeves. And you can also turn this into a top super easily by just using the lining pieces and cutting those twice. All right, at this point, this means you have completed sewing the maple dress. You've gone through all the different steps, and I hope you found that it was actually a pretty simple pattern to work through and that you can probably whip out a few of these, or at least one of these, in maybe an afternoon or maybe over a couple days. There aren't too many pattern pieces, and the steps aren't so daunting. So if you've never worked with knits before, this might even be a good project to start with because I think it is somewhat of a beginner friendly ish kind of pattern. And if you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to share with me about the pattern or anything you want to know about the pattern, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. And don't forget, if you haven't bought the pattern, you can also find the discount code in the little caption. I am planning on doing a lot more tutorials and some more behind the scenes of how I create my patterns and some more of like the pattern making, grading, all the kind of like technical stuff. So if you're interested in that, stick around. I'm going to be producing hopefully a lot more videos this year. It's one of my goals. So if you feel like it, you could hit subscribe and see a lot more of that coming very soon. For now, it was so lovely to sew with you today. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and thank you so much for sharing part of it with me.